Hello class, welcome to Unit 7.1, Introduction to Polynomials. When we talk about polynomials, the first thing you need to understand that is a polynomial is just an expression of two or more terms. So when you see down here below, when you see this string of different terms, that makes up the polynomial. So when you look at each one, the other thing we need to kind of understand is terms. Let's jump down to that one because each one of these is a term. Okay, it's kind of separated by that plus or minus symbol. So when we look at all of them, those are our terms. All of those terms together make up your polynomial. And the other thing we need to look out for is the degree. Now the degree is just going to be your largest degree, which is really just the exponent. So when you look in here, this would be the third degree. Now we'll talk about that in other ones. Now this one would be like a second degree. Here would technically be like a first degree. But when you're trying to classify a polynomial, it's the largest one, which would be that one. So let's take a look at some more stuff about polynomials. So when we start classifying polynomials, we can classify them by the degree. Now, when we look at the degree, keep in mind that these are always like x to the nth. And whatever that number up there is, that is your degree. So if we see something to the 0 power, that's going to be a constant. You see an x to the first power, that's going to make it linear. So you look at something like x to the first power, a lot of times this is just x. If you see something that's x to the second power, that's going to make that quadratic. You see something to the third power, that's going to be cubic. And as you kind of notice, the fourth, that's going to be quartic. And the fifth is going to be quintic. Now, most of these will kind of stop after 4. So we definitely want to make sure we're constant, linear, quadratic, cubic, quartic. Now, we've been working with linear quite a bit, but we'll start seeing some quadratics, cubics, things like that. When we classify by the number of terms, so remember, each time you see something that ends up being multiple terms, this is going to be where we can say like just 1. So this would end up being like maybe all we see is like a 4x squared. Well, that's going to be a monomial because there's only one term. Binomial, that might be something like a x squared plus 4. Well, now we see 2 of them. That's going to be binomial. So again, think of anything there, bicycle, that means 2 wheels. When we go to the third one, that would be a trinomial. So trinomial or a tricycle, that's going to be when you see something that has 3 terms. So as you look through these, we're either going to be classifying by number of terms, classifying by degrees. So those are our terminologies we need to be, basically aware of. So when we look at classifying monomials, what we're really kind of referring to is what is the degree. Okay, so we're going to be trying to look for our degree. Now, when we look at our degrees, they work a little differently depending on, how they're set up. If it was just like our first examples, if we're only looking at one term, it's, either going to be like that constant, linear, quadratic, cubic. But when we start seeing multiple things here, the way we kind of figure out the amount of degrees is by adding up all of your exponents. So if we see a 1 and 1, this is something to the second degree. Okay. This one here, that's a constant. We don't have any variables. We look at something over here. Now this has got 2 different things going on. So you add them together. This would be like your fifth, the degree of 5. Okay. So, that's really kind of what we're looking for. A little bit different than just the singular variables. But really, it's just a matter of adding up all of your exponents to determine the degree. Because right now, every single one of these is monomials. You can see every example, there's no plus or minuses between. So what we want to do is figure out the degrees. So let's take a look at one more before you can try 5, 6, 7, and 8. We look over here. Now we got 3 different variables going on. So just add them up. 2 plus 8 plus 3, that's 13. So that would be degree of 13. All right, so we'll pause here, finish 5, 6, 7, 8 before you move on. Okay. Hopefully that's what we came up with here. We got that first degree, but because for 6, we got that to the first degree, because there's only one variable, we can call that linear. 4, again, is going to be a lot like constant. And the last one there, 3 plus 1 plus 2 is 6, so degree of 6. Okay, example 2, notice we are stating the degree of each polynomial, then classify it by its degree and by the number of terms. All right, so when we start looking for the degree, we're looking for our highest exponent. Notice in all of these, we don't have the multiple variables. So when we look at this to the first power, the first thing we're going to be able to do here is say that this is linear. This is what we've been working with quite some time now. And if we look at the number of terms, well, that's 1, 2. So we're going to have 2 terms, which mean that's going to be linear and binomial. Okay, when we look through example 2 and we start looking for degrees, well, here we have a 1. Our biggest one we have here is to the second degree. The second degree is going to be what we call quadratic. And when we look for the number of terms, well, that's 1, 2, 3. Well, 3 is trinomial. Okay, kind of keep working through. Where is our biggest degree? Degree of 2 is going to be what we call a quadratic. And again, it looks like we have 1, 2, 3 terms as trinomial. Okay, number 4, we only got 3 as our degree, which this is going to be what's called a cubic. And we only see 1 term here. Well, this is back to just 1 term being monomial. Okay, as you look through each of these, label them the best we can. You might see in number 5, that 8 there. Well, we can just call that an 8th degree polynomial. But when we start looking at how many terms they are, also with that one, we don't really have a name for 4 of them. I mean, there are names out there, but we're going to only be worried about basically 1 through 3. So finish up 6, 7, 8. Pause here before you move on. So when you finish up 6, 7, 8, 6 is a linear and only 1 term, so a monomial. Highest degree is 4, so that's quartic with 3 terms, so that makes it a trinomial. And 8 has a degree of 2, which is quadratic, and 2 terms, which make it a binomial. So what you will also hear a lot of times being said is what's called standard form. And this is just going to be when your degrees are in descending order. So that's going to be from highest to lowest. So when we look at these examples down below here, the first thing it's saying is write each polynomial in standard form and then classify by degree and number of terms. So the only additional step we need to look at here is look for your highest degree. That should always come first. Then we look for our next one, so that would be plus 3x. This would now be what we call standard form. Our degrees are highest to lowest, 2, 1, no constants. So what we now want to be is basically say, well, what is a second degree? Well, that is what we call a quadratic. And we have two terms, so that again is binomial. When you look at this next one, example 2, again, start by going standard form. Find your highest degree. Looks like a 7, so that's already in the right place. Then we want to go to cubed, so that's minus 2x cubed. And then we go down to plus 4. All right, now that we have this in standard form, if we look for degree, well, it looks like it's the highest degree is the 7th one. Now, we don't have a term for that, so we could just say it's a 7th degree polynomial. And when we look at the terms, well, we count up 3 of them. We do call that a trinomial. All right, try 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so when we get them in, first of all, get them in standard form. And 3 we find out is quadratic because it's degree 2, and 3 terms make it a trinomial. When we look down at example 4, get them in standard form. Our biggest degree is 4, so we call that quartic. And because there's 3 terms, again, we call that trinomial. And number 5, when we get that negative 2x plus 1, that is called linear, and it is a monomial. Now, notice that when we brought that negative 2x, the minus comes with the 2x. Also in example 4, when we said negative 6x to the 4th, that negative would accompany that to the front. So, that's our lesson of kind of introductions to polynomials. Moving forward, we'll start talking about how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So, make sure we finish our assignments and have a nice day.